Professor Majaliwa, should we be starting?
Yes, I wanted to start exactly this. Yes, ma'am. So good morning and good afternoon, according to your location. You are again welcome to these webinars, the series of webinars we have been conducting under the Regional University Forum for Capacity Building in Agriculture, related to climate adaptation and mitigation sciences, especially climate smart agriculture and climate information system. We have two instructors today, and this is basically a training of trainers. But before we start, I would like to welcome the Deputy Executive Secretary of RUFORAM, Dr. Florence, to give us welcoming remarks, and then we'll start the training.
Thank you very much, Professor Majaliwa. Always a pleasure that you are here to give this introduction. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you very much for joining this series, as has already been said by Professor Majaliwa. Welcome to this interaction. It is an interaction of the different actors under the ACRA program. RUFORAM is a partner in this ACRA program, which is a partnership on how climate smart, how we can address climate change from the different perspectives. In our case, as universities, we are looking at how we can address climate change through climate smart agriculture and climate information systems from a university perspective. So thank you very much for joining us. This is one in a series. We have more than 13 modules, and these modules are available for the different actors in the university system and in the training system. So you will pick stuff that you may want to have as a course. You may pick stuff that you want to have as a module. You may pick stuff that you want to have as best practice that can be adopted. We do welcome both staff and students of the RUFORAM network who can be able to appreciate. This is awareness about climate smart agriculture and how climate information systems influences agriculture processes on the continent. And we are glad that you are here. We are glad that you're able to join us. It is a 3-day training, if I may use the word. So we have the training today, 2 hours. We have tomorrow and also on Monday. So please, thank you for being here, and thank you for joining. Open your ears, come in with an open mind, and we can learn together to see how best we can take our continent forward. Thank you very much, Professor Anthony Chibe and Professor Oliver Wasonga, both from University of Egerton and University of Nairobi, respectively, for being part of this process. Also to let you know that these courses, these modules will be online as we go along. But for today, please use an open mind. We shall request for feedback as well on how this is going, and we appreciate your input into developing this process effectively. So thank you very much. And with that, I hand over to Majaliwa and instructors for today to take the process forward. Thank you very much. Nice to see you, Prof. Kipi. Looking smart and nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Des. Thank you for those welcoming remarks. So let me now welcome Professor Kibe and Prof. Oliver Vivian Wasonga to take us through this module. Prof, you are welcome.
Well, I think Oliver, I think he's the one who's to start. Oliver, over to you. But I just want to greet everybody. Habari zenyu from Eastern Africa. For those who are from far off, my name is Professor Anthony Kibe. I'll be handling this together along with Professor Oliver Wasonga. Oliver.
Oliver, you are muted if you are speaking.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to share my screen first, and then I will start off. Guess you are able to see my screen first.
Yes, but you can put it in PowerPoint in slide mode.
Is it? It's not on PowerPoint mode yet?
Not yet.
I just wanted to confirm. Sorry?
Not yet.
Okay. Then I will. Let me just do it once more. Okay. I'm sure this will work now. Okay, I guess that works now.
Yes, that's okay now.
Yes, so thank you once more. I hope you can hear me loud and clear. Is that right? I want to confirm that first. And you can also see me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
so
we can hear you.
yes, my name is Oliver Wasonga. I'm from the University of Nairobi. And once more, I welcome you to today's pilot training on climate smart agriculture. And basically, we are going to look at the basics in terms of practices and technology. And before we take a deep dive into the module, it is proper to get to ask ourselves why and what. Why climate smart agriculture? And what exactly does this module entail? And so I will take you through this, and then toward the end, I will introduce the concept and the basic principles of climate smart agriculture to start us off. So let's look at the module contents. So first, we shall have the introduction, which basically gives the background and the rationale for the course. And for all the chapters, at the end of it, we have some takeaway messages and some quiz for the participants, as well as further reading. Then in chapter 2, we have understanding climate smart agriculture. And this is basically about the concept, getting to understand the principles of climate smart agriculture, and going further to understand how climate smart agriculture is used as a strategy in reducing climate risk in agriculture. And then at the end of it, as I've already indicated, there are some takeaway messages, the quiz, and also some readings for the participants. Our chapter 3 is about climate smart agriculture practices in Africa. And this starts by basically defining the dimensions of climate smart practices and taking us through the common climate smart agriculture technologies and practices. And then, of course, at the end, there will be key messages, quiz for the participants, and some readings as well. Chapter 4 comprises of the various approaches that we use in implementation and diffusion of climate smart agriculture practices and technologies. And so here we give examples from Climate Smart Village, the Farmer Field Schools, functional land management approach, and climate smart agriculture landscapes. And then at the end, there will be some takeaway messages that help us basically to recap on what we've learned, and then there's a quiz and further rating at the end as well. Chapter 5, we provide some illustrated examples of various technologies, and these are clustered into climate smart agriculture for crop production, climate smart agriculture for livestock and aquaculture management, and then climate smart agriculture for ecosystem and landscape. So we're basically going to go through this. And again, as at the end, there will be some key messages to remind us of what we have gone through, quiz, and also some readings. At the end, we have a chapter on enablers and barriers to adoption of CSA, the climate smart agriculture. And here we'll be looking at those factors that enable and those which that constrain adoption of these practices amongst or in agri-systems in Africa, basically. And we have key messages and quiz and further reading at the end of it. So now, looking at the learning outcomes, what is it that we expect at the end of this course? One, we expect that having gone through this module, one should be able to describe the various CSA practices and technologies, and then one can be able to further evaluate the various approaches or strategies on the basis of their ability or potential to enhance ecosystem and livelihood resilience, that the participants should be able to apply the acquired information and knowledge in infusing this climate smart agriculture into existing academic programs and those for the academia, and also as well as integrating this into agricultural practice for those who practice. That the participants should also be able to use these skills that are required to develop appropriate location-specific CSA practices and technologies, and also be able to apply the acquired information and knowledge in informing policies, so that we have appropriate policies that address and that can further inform or guide adoption of climate smart agriculture. This module is designed to be a hybrid one, meaning that we can have both face-to-face and open distance e-learning approaches, but it's largely going to be a synchronous learning where there's opportunity for learners to do this at the same time or at different times. For this particular pilot, it will be basically online, but then once this is up and running, we have all those options available. It is designed to have exams and certificate of participation awarded at the end when it's up and fully running, and the course or the module takes a maximum of 6 hours. As you already know, we're going to run this for 3 days, 2 hours per day. So, some bit of background, because then this is very key. We get to understand where we are coming from and why we are talking about climate smart agriculture in the first place. The fact that the world population is increasing cannot be gainsaid, and we expect this to increase by 1/3 by the year 2050. And when this happens, then we also have to ensure that we increase agricultural production with either equal or more margin, and we expect this to happen or increase by 60% by in the same period, to be able to satisfy the expected increase in demand for food and feed. And therefore, what does this mean? It means that agriculture must transform to feed the growing global population, to be able to address those basics or provide the foundation for economic growth. But then climate change throws a spanner in the works. And so as we try or strive to increase productivity in our agricultural systems, we also have to be cognizant of the fact that climate change poses a big challenge. And so this also has to be addressed as we pursue enhanced agricultural production. So a more productive and resilient agricultural systems would therefore require a major shift in the way land, water, soil nutrients, and the genetic resources are managed, in the sense that we have to find ways of managing them in more efficient ways to enhance productivity and also for sustainability. So, agriculture, ideally, therefore, lies at the crossroads of climate change mitigation and adaptation. That we are eyeing to achieve these three at the same time. We want to enhance productivity, but we want to do it in a way that does not increase greenhouse gas emissions that then lead to drive climate change in the same direction. At the same time, trying to adapt to the changing environment and climate. So it is well known that agriculture is both a culprit and also a victim of climate change. The fact that over 10%, close to 14% of the global greenhouse gas emissions is coming from agricultural related activities, and that those which are related to conversion of land also account to slightly over 10%. So if you combine agricultural activities and those activities related to land use and conversion, then you get a very significant contribution to the greenhouse gas emission from such kind of activities or human activities. So how does CSA approach respond to this? Climate smart agriculture responds to both climate change mitigation and adaptation through increasing productivity, reducing of greenhouse gas emissions, and enhancing resilience of agroecosystems and livelihoods. And so that's the basis of climate smart agriculture, trying to strike that delicate balance. So the objectives of the module is basically to contribute towards promotion of CSA approach among researchers, academia, and practitioners, with the ultimate goal of, one, increasing productivity and income, but in a sustainable manner, adapting to climate change through improvements in water and soil management by creating favorable microclimatic conditions for production, better use of agrobiodiversity, and rational management of crop and animal production. But this has to be done also through reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So trying to strike the balance again between these three. So some of the messages to take home here are basically that the rising world population will require equally attempt to increase the agricultural production to satisfy the expected demands. And also agriculture must therefore transform itself in order to feed the growing population and also to provide the basis for economic growth and poverty reduction. But then bearing in mind that climate change will make this difficult, okay, given the adverse impacts on agricultural productivity. And so as we strive to increase food security, to enhance our economic growth, we also have to consider how our activities also help to mitigate against climate change and also enhance adaptation in agroecosystems. So it will be necessary to pursue food security and agricultural development goals, adaptation to climate change, and lower greenhouse gas emissions at the same time. As I've said, this is a delicate balance, but that's what climate smart agriculture aims to achieve by addressing both climate change through mitigation and adaptation, and also trying to increase productivity in a sustainable manner. So we have some quizzes at the end here, which basically helps us to remind ourselves of some important facts. And one of them is basically to ask ourselves why it is necessary to transform agriculture with respect to what we've discussed. Why is it necessary really to transform the way we do undertake agriculture or agricultural production? And what are the rationale for promotion of climate smart agriculture in smallholder systems? That's basically is the bottom line. Once one has understood why, then it sets in motion the rest. So I want us to look at some of the concepts and principles that underpin climate smart agriculture, because then this is very key. And as you've been, Florence has already alluded to, the purpose of this module is basically to introduce you to some of these concepts and principles as well as the practices. But you'd be able to get more from the various modules that already have been developed for those who want to delve deeper into the technologies and various approaches. So let's try to understand the climate smart agriculture. And it can be defined as an approach for transforming and reorienting agricultural development under the new realities of climate change. Yes, that we've been practicing agriculture over the years, but then there's a new challenge that comes in form of climate change. So we have to transform the way we practice to conform with this new challenge. So FAO defines climate smart agriculture as an agriculture that sustainably increases productivity, enhances resilience, and reduces or removes greenhouse gas emissions where possible, and enhances the achievement of national food security and development goals. So trying to tackle production, adaptation, and mitigation at the same time. So CSA seeks to increase farm productivity in a sustainable manner and support farmers to adapt to climate change by building the resilience of agricultural livelihoods and ecosystems, and to deliver the core benefit of reduced greenhouse gas emissions. Because in the quest to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, in a quest to adapt, then we end up with those additional benefits that also come along. So, the principles of CSA. The main goal of climate smart agriculture is to contribute to increasing food security and development. And this is achieved through improving productivity or increasing productivity, encouraging adaptation to climate change, as well as mitigation. And there are three interlinked pillars to enable this, to make this happen. And this is what we refer to as the three pillars of climate smart agriculture. These are production, adaptation, and mitigation, the three pillars of climate smart agriculture. So when it comes to production, climate smart agriculture aims to sustainably increase agricultural productivity and therefore income from agricultural activities. And this could be through crop, livestock, fish production, but ensuring that this is done without or with minimum negative impact on the environment. And this is achieved through increased resource use efficiency in agricultural systems. When it comes to adaptation, climate smart agriculture is intended to reduce the exposure of farmers to short-term risks, while also strengthening their resilience by building their capacity to adapt and prosper in the face of climatic shocks. And in adaptation, their specific or particular attention is given to enhancing the resilience of agricultural systems. And one way of doing this is through diversification of production and the management of the agricultural systems, as well as protection of the ecosystem services, which are essential for maintaining productivity and also supporting adaptation to climate change. When it comes to mitigation, climate smart agriculture should be designed to help minimize or otherwise remove greenhouse gas emissions. By reducing this, the emissions by each calorie or kilo of food or fiber that is produced from agricultural systems, or fuel that is produced. So basically, by trying to either avoid or minimize emissions from either fuel or our energy or our agricultural practices. And this can be achieved through avoidance of deforestation related to agricultural activity or any other activities that basically remove vegetation or trees from our environment. This could be go beyond just agricultural activities. And management of soils and trees in a manner that maximize their potential to act as carbon sinks and also be able to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So we are basically talking about practices that enhance carbon storage and also increase sequestration. So this means that agricultural system should be designed to increase carbon content of the soils being very key in carbon storage, as well as the above ground biomass that also helps in the sequestration of carbon. So these are just some graphics on contribution of various emissions to global warming. And you can see we have fluorinated gases, which are mainly from either domestic or industrial use of such kind of gases in production. Nitrous oxide, much of it coming from agricultural intensification, as well as methane. But you can see when it comes to the how much they contribute to the greenhouse gas pool, you can see high carbon dioxide producing much more than the rest, followed by methane. And then you have nitrous oxide and the fluorinated gases. So as I have alluded to, there are various sources of greenhouse gases, but mainly from agricultural activities, industrial activities, and other human activities related to conversion of land. But these have far-reaching impacts. One main one is that these increase temperatures, they reduce crop duration or growing period, and increase crop respiration. They alter photosynthetic partitioning and reduce therefore economic products. They alter survival and distribution of pest population, bringing new challenges in different areas or environments. They hasten nutrient mineralization in soil and decrease nutrient use efficiencies. So these are some of the impacts that we expect from escalating greenhouse gas globally. Some of the impacts of global warming in agriculture include increase in evapotranspiration, and this means that the crop water requirement therefore also increases as they increasingly lose water. Frequency and intensity of inter and intra-seasonal droughts and floods are expected with global warming. Decline in arable areas that are suitable for farming due to submergence of coastal lands, soil erosion, increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide that will promote C3 photosynthetic pathways, and these promote crops like rice and wheat, and as well as their growth and productivity. Increased herbicide use due to high growth of C3 weeds. So there is a disadvantage to that. that this will also promote the C3 grasses, their growth, and therefore this means that farmers have to spend more herbicide, more on herbicide to control this. Yeah. So temperatures are expected to increase also by 1, 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, and this would reduce rice grain yield by 5.4, 7.4, and 25%. That has been reported in some areas. So these impacts are largely, likely to vary depending on where you are, while some of the changes may favor certain systems or certain areas, others could be detrimental depending on where one is. So looking at the synergies of the 3 pillars of climate smart agriculture, and as I've already alluded to, based on this, climate smart agriculture presents the opportunity to meet the world's food demands in the face of climate variability. And these initiatives are more responsive to the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 2, that one of actually enhancing food security, and the one on climate action, the SDG 13, that aims to increase aims to address climate change. And so these 3 pillars are actually interlinked in the sense that they provide more of a holistic approach to addressing climate change than basically just pursuing one of them. And so it is important to understand that this really is the bottom line behind climate smart agriculture, trying to optimize production in the sense that we increase productivity, but in a way that also helps mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and also enhance resilience of the system at the same time. So some important facts that we need to take home with respect to climate smart agriculture as a strategy to reduce climate risk in agricultural system is that we are likely to see the increase of the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, such as droughts, and this will have profound impacts on ecosystems in agriculture, agroforestry, and fisheries as well. And that agricultural sector is particularly vulnerable to this because different crops and animals thrive under different climatic conditions. And so if these conditions are altered, then you are likely also be forced to find ways of coping with the changes that come along. So the other fact is that agriculture is highly dependent on consistent temperature ranges and water availability. And these are some of the factors that climate change also threatens to undermine. And so this gives us some hint when trying to promote climate smart agriculture, areas that one probably need to give a lot of emphasis at the areas that are most affected by the changing climate. So in addition, we are likely to see plant pests and diseases increasing incidences and spread into outside their usual territories, therefore posing new challenges in different areas. So by reducing climatic risks, we therefore require we are required to increase resilience of production systems. And this can be done through improved management to increase productivity, as well as resilience of local livelihoods. And so the premise of climate smart agriculture approach is to seek answer to the question of what steps can be taken now to move towards a more sustainable future in agriculture, taking into consideration the climate risks that are prevailing. So some of the takeaways here, if I can just go through them very fast, are that climate smart agriculture aims to transform, reorient agriculture development under the new realities of climate change, that it seeks to increase farm productivity, adaptation to climate change, and build resilience of agricultural systems, to enhance also the core benefits that come with the reduction of greenhouse emissions, that it seeks to strengthen livelihoods and food security by improving management and use of natural resources in a sustainable manner, that CSA integrates enhanced food production by increasing resource use efficiency in agricultural systems, climate change adaptation by enhancing resilience of agricultural systems, and climate change mitigation by minimizing or removing greenhouse gas emissions. And so just two questions after all this are, what are the three pillars of climate smart agriculture? Because then this is the basis, really the bottom line of climate smart agriculture. What are these three pillars? Because these are the three areas that underpin climate smart agriculture practices. And what is the role of climate smart agriculture as a strategy for reducing climate risk in agriculture? So I think I will pause there. That has been a long one. I will pause there and look at some of the questions on the Q&A, hoping that you are all still there. Are we there?
Yes, we are there.
So,
Yeah.
Prof, I think at this stage, if there are questions,
Yeah.
we could get some of those questions.
Exactly.
So, colleagues, whoever has a question can raise his hand, and we'll be able to
We'll upgrade them, Prof.
to give them opportunity to talk, or they can draft their questions. Is it possible, Nada? They draft the questions, and then we read them.
Yeah, they can talk, Prof. We can give them. We can allow the person who's willing to ask questions directly. See, two people are raising hands. Sam, you
Yes,
can talk
I can.
now. You can ask.
Okay. Yes.
You can unmute.
With Samoyo Sam? Is it?
Yes, Sam.
Sam, you can go. Go ahead.
Okay, if it's not ready, let us see the second one.
But I can also see on Q&A, someone I think is asking the three pillars are adaptation, resilience, and mitigation. Yes. And could the contents and materials be shared with us? I think, yes, the note should be shared. Prof. Majaliwa, I think arrangements will be made to share this. I don't know whether the participants are able to find them online or how exactly this will be done, but
They
I
will be
guess
shared.
yes.
Will be shared. All the materials will be shared, Prof.
Okay, okay, thank you.
I see someone raising Wafula. Can we give him permission to ask?
Okay, Wafula. Kelvin.
Wafula, you can unmute, please. Kelvin.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof, for this wonderful presentation. So my question is quick. So in the three pillars of climate smart agriculture, you talked about production, adaptation, and mitigation. So my question will now go to the second one, which is on adaptation, because for our smallholder farmers to adapt to majorly some of these climate smart agriculture, there's something we normally measure about the adaptive capacity. So how do we ensure that most of these smallholder farmers whom we are trying to sell this climate smart agriculture are able to adapt to these technologies? So basically, how do we ensure that the adaptive capacity of our smallholder farmers is at a high so that they can adapt to these technologies? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. The very, very fast approach to enhancing the capacity of the farmers to adapt is first to empower them. Is first to provide the information, the knowledge, the skills. Okay? Of course, adaptation will also require resources, but the very, very first one is to sensitize them, make them aware of the available technologies, available approaches that can be used, equipping them with the requisite knowledge and skills to do that. And of course, then this calls for all the actors to come in form of the government providing the requisite policy environment, because then if there are appropriate policies, then what this means is that resources are also allocated, and there can also be some technical backstopping to support the farmers. Yeah. So for me, the very first thing is to equip them with the knowledge and skills, and the rest can fall in place. But it's also a role of those who already have the information, that have the capability to lobby or advocate for this among the decision makers as well. Yeah.
Prof, do we still have a space? There are some people still raising hands.
I haven't seen another.
They are there. There are like 4, but I don't know how many can you allow to ask questions.
Okay, let's just have all of them. We still have time.
Okay.
A few minutes.
Let me give them permission.
Yes, please.
Charles,
Okay.
you can
Charles,
unmute.
yes. Charles, kindly.
Let us pick another person. Is open.
Are you
Please.
able to hear me now?
Yes, please.
Yes, I want to thank Professor so much. And in his introduction, he talked quite good things. And my interest is in these genetic resources, more especially in the area of animals. And you know, we have been traditionally having breeds which take more than 24 months to mature. I don't now looking at this smart agriculture and producing what can be managed by the growing population. But also my second question is on how to reduce these emissions, which the professor talked about. I see 7 to 14 global emissions affecting, and that is a lot in our carbon emissions. I don't know, either I'm asking a question coming in the next lecture, or it can be answered now. Those areas which can help us, more especially in animal sector, how to reduce, so that when we are talking to these livestock farmers, we would be beginning to address these challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charles. I would respond by saying that these questions could be answered even better in the other modules, but I can respond to them very fast. There's a very delicate balance between increasing productivity and also ensuring that this is also done in a sustainable way, especially when it comes to livestock breeding, because what has been going on is that we are trying to improve the breeds. But we realize that the indigenous breeds are even more tolerant to the changing climate than the exotic ones that probably produce more than the indigenous one. So I think by getting both traits, taking advantage of the traits in the indigenous or local breeds and improved breeds which produce more, then we have a better breed. So that would be one way of looking at it, yeah, that you get those good traits from the local breeds that has made them to be to survive under extreme climatic conditions, and combine that with the high productivity traits from, for example, exotic breeds to produce breeds that can withstand the changing climate. One way of ensuring that we have reduced emissions in livestock system, especially in Africa, where much of the livestock production is happening in extensive systems, is by a proper management of grazing, because then that's where the rubber meets the road. So that is one approach. But of course, also in intensive systems, one can work around improving the quality of feed, because then much of the emissions there are related either through methane or through intensive production of feed, through nitrous oxide emissions and so on. So that's how I can respond to that. But of course, you can definitely get more answers in the other modules that are, as we did indicate at the beginning, already on offer. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. I'm giving permission to is this Zeno, or the name is difficult for me?
Yes, hello.
Yeah, hello, please.
I'm
Yes.
talking from Benin. My name is Luke. I am PhD student in biometry. So I would like to thank very much professors, and mainly the speaker who take his time to explain everything properly. But the part of the role of climate smart agriculture as strategy, I found this part very important for me, but the part went a little bit fast for me. So if the professor can come back to it and explain, I will be very happy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Luke, which part in particular
The part
did you say?
of strategy.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes.
So I'm just sampling some of the comments there. There are a lot on the chart. Some of them are basically just comments. Some of them are questions, and someone is asking, what is the difference between coping up and adaptation? Wow. Maybe I can explain that in simpler terms, that coping is more of survival, and it's a short-term strategy that helps one to respond to immediate risk, while adaptation is a more of long-term, a proactive approach in an anticipation of a pending risk. Yeah. So I know we need to shift gears to something else, but I have another. Okay, I'm just
You
trying
want us to allow other person to talk? Go.
maybe just one, and then I can hand over to Professor Kibe. Yes, Daniel Osai. Did I? Okay.
Daniel? Do you he remove his hand, I think? Now it's okay.
Yes, Daniel.
Daniel,
still
you
muted.
can unmute, please. Yeah, okay, go
Okay,
ahead.
yeah. Thank you very much. My name is Daniel from Nigeria. So I'm actually happy to take part in this this program. Yeah, but Prof, I would like you to do make some clarification on this, like how how can we, or how do we reconcile urban development, regarding, just regarding Africa's, for example, there is a rapid rate of development since we are underdeveloped. Countries are developing these days, and development brings about destruction of forest, and then these forests also serves as, a way of mitigating the effects of greenhouse gases, as serving as carbon sink. So if, for example, now that there have been some form of advocacy that people should go into controlled farming systems such as hydroponics and greenhouse farming system, and here in Nigeria, lots of persons are actually adopting that. How then can, if for example there's a mass adoption of a controlled farming system, how do we reconcile this development in such a way that it doesn't still defeat the aim of these plants also, serving as carbon sinks to these greenhouse gases?
If I heard you, I think basically you are alluding at the difficulty in achieving economic growth while also trying to address the issue of climate change by ensuring we have in place approaches to mitigate and adapt at the same time. So it's basically that delicate balance that I've been talking about. But this also comes with the incentive. I think the incentive to undertake sustainable practices in form of payment for ecosystem services, and the most popular one being the carbon credit kind of approach mechanism, would be one way of tilting this balance, because then again, as you already alluded to, it's already a difficult one to strike. So I can't say I have there's a silver bullet to it, but then it requires more of integrated kind of approach. But that's just one example, because when you give incentive, then that drives people to try to undertake practices that to enable us to achieve these three, to address the three pillars of climate smart agriculture. Yeah. Daniel, did that help?
Yes, Prof. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay.
So I just hope maybe in course of the presentation, maybe there could be, you could address it more into that, probably with time. I don't know.
Sorry, what was the question?
I said, is it possible maybe like with time, if you can give a holistic breakdown on how we can, reconcile these developments, economic development and greenhouse mitigation strategies? I don't know. Is it possible?
Yes.
Because of the lecture.
We can, yeah, it's more of turning the trade-offs into synergies. That's basically what you are talking about. Yeah. So yes, that would be a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So can we then shift gears and Nadav, thanks very much.
You're welcome, bro.
For helping with the moderation. We need to shift gears now, and I want to hand over to Professor Kibe. I don't know whether we can do it straight away, then we have more time at the end, or have a few minutes break. What works better for Professor Kibe? Prof. Kibe, are you there?
Yeah, I think we can move on.
Okay, thank you.
Mm.
Thank you, and welcome. Do you want me to project, or you can do it from your side?
Yeah, I'll do it from my side.
Do it from your side is better, that is, so that you can control it.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope the lighting is good enough. Thank you, Professor Oliver, and also for the interaction from members. As you heard, my name is Anthony Kibe, and I work in Egerton University in the Department of Crops, Horticulture, and Soils. And I'm an agronomist by profession. And mostly trained in nutrient and water management. And I've been training for a number of years. I don't want to say how many, you might be shocked how many, but this is indeed a great privilege to come and share with you these issues about climate, issues of climate change, and what we call as global warming. Some people give it different, of course, names and terms, but they are more or less the same. We do have other modules. I think you might have gone through the earlier one, issues of climate information sciences, as well as issues really on the basics of why there is, climate change, how winds affect the rains, and how they're affected by temperatures, and how the oceans also, due to warming up, they bring up about things like the tsunami, as you might have heard, the hurricanes, All these things are issues that are affecting the world because of the temperatures, the way the water warms up, the way you are near the ocean, coastal regions, you can be affected more than in other places, wind speeds and all those things. So without talking much about what you could have also studied in the past,
Sorry,
I would want
Prof.
us to, yeah.
Sorry, someone
Yes.
is saying the volume is low.
Volume is low.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I normally have a soft voice.
just go on. At least you can hear. Yeah.
Okay, but I'm not seeing myself. I don't want to move too close to the screen. I sometimes are forced to come this close so that I may be heard. Is that fair? Is that better?
Yeah, okay, bro.
It's okay.
That's better. Okay. But you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see the screen.
We can see.
Okay, I just wanted us to observe that picture because that's all we are talking about. Issues about the dimensions. We'll be covering the dimensions of climate change, what really affects, and some you have, I think you've heard from Oliver. And you can see from this picture here, there is the industry, the chemical fertilizers are produced, and the aerosols, the hydrochlorofluorocarbons, chlorofluorocarbons, they come from industries and we use those, and they have a very, very high capacity of absorbing heat. And when they go into the atmosphere, they tend to absorb the heat that is reflected from the earth. So you find that about 30% of the radiation energy that lands on the earth is reflected back into the atmosphere. And it's supposed to go out and be lost out there in the stratosphere and beyond. Unfortunately, the gases that are there, especially like water vapor. Water vapor itself can also absorb that heat and make it retain it within the atmosphere. We have, as you've heard, carbon dioxide as well, which is supposed to be the biggest gas that affects us globally and enhances heating. But in reality, when you compare it with nitrous oxide, you find that it doesn't absorb as much heat as nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide absorbs up to over almost 298 times that of oxygen, that of carbon dioxide. And you can see it is emitted from soils, organic matter. We do have other pictures, but I just thought of bringing this out. Through the process of nitrification, when you apply fertilizer nitrogen, it is formed into nitrates, and thereafter it is formed into nitrous gas, and even which is volatile. In case of methane, that happens in reduced soils where you don't have oxygen and you have organic matter, and you find that hydrogen is oxidized to bicarbonates and ultimately the methane, which is also a gas, and it is emitted into the earth. And that also absorbs a lot of heat that is supposed to leave the atmosphere. So we need now to control organic matter. I think there was a question that came up about animal production. You find that animals also, through enteric fermentation, regurgitation, they do have a number of stomachs. They produce a lot of methane, and that is usually because of the type of pastures that are eaten. If you have pastures that are too old, they're too advanced. They tend to be having a lot of cellulose, hemicellulase, they are lignified, and so they stay in the stomach and they have to be fermented. And due to that process, you find that ultimately they form methane. And so livestock has become one of the biggest, they argue, pollutants and greenhouse producers. So we also have issues of burning. As you can see here, whatever we burn, whether it is in the form of crop residues, they also emit all these gases that go up into the atmosphere. So in order to mitigate against this or to fight against this, we have to look for ways of how can we reduce the use of fossil fuels, especially the charcoal. You know, we cut down our trees to get wood, which we use for cooking. Are there alternatives? The coal. You find coal also has become a big problem that is produced, that is mined, and is used as a fuel. Also, it produces a lot of carbon dioxide. Our vehicles, in fact, that is not even here, is also a big problem. They emit a lot of nitrous gas, carbon monoxide, which is also poisonous and contribute towards the carbon content in the air. In fact, the argument is that we have moved from 300 parts per million to over 400 parts per million. And there are projections where they're saying if we continue using our fossil fuels, we are likely to end up even going to, research is showing up to even more than 450. So we need to look at ways of having agroforestry, which are carbon sinks. You know, the process of photosynthesis, when we have a lot of crops growing, then they absorb carbon dioxide and they turn it into carbohydrates and other assimilates that are used for the growth and production of products that are of human use. There are issues about issues of conservation, agriculture, when you allow a lot of turning of the soil, and especially at high temperatures, which might have been caused by global warming, there's a tendency of enhancing mineralization. And that mineralization also turns again the carbohydrates into carbon dioxide, and ultimately you end up having again a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So conservation tillage can help in I would say mitigating against enhanced gases that are greenhouse, that cause greenhouse or global warming. Systems of rice intensification, I think this we may know, we've heard about it. It's where we have intermittent flooding, of the rice cultures. Instead of having the soil being grown for a long time under submerged conditions, you remove the water through drainage and let the crops use the soil moisture that is within that soil. And then when it reaches a certain critical point, you again now do the flooding or irrigation. So in that, you tend to find that you can be able to minimize reduced conditions in the soil, where you have, you enhance the aeration. And so anaerobic conditions that enhance methane production are minimized. So that system has been found to help in rice cultures, which contribute about 8% of the greenhouse gases when it comes to methane and nitrous gas. When you talk about integrated pest management, of course, when you increase high temperatures, there's an enhanced population of pests, which ultimately demand more pesticides. So we have to look at ways of how to, in increasing global temperatures, we have to see how we can be able to look at ways of using organic pesticides, which are not detrimental or cause environmental pollution. Integrated soil and nutrient management. Of course, I mentioned about the soil cultures. We can be using issues like composting. Composting also helps in minimizing carbon emissions. So when we have a lot of food loss, where do we dump it? The places where we keep it, a lot of waste management issues, you find they are sources of some of these gases that cause global warming. So when we compost them and we use that also in putting them within our soils, we can also enhance soil nutrients. We can enhance organic carbon. We can also enhance just the soil physical conditions, enhancing the water holding capacity, and therefore we have a better health. Issues of use of crop varieties tolerant to adverse factors. I think this is an issue of breeding, where we breed short duration crops in case we have droughts, or we can use, we can breed for high productive varieties that grow in shorter periods. Those ones can help in adaptation to climate change. Of course, water conservation and management, where we keep that water stored somewhere, and we are able now to use it later, especially when we have dry spells that are a result of climate variability. I think there was someone who wrote in the chat, what about climate variability? Climate variability is different in a way from climate change, in that these are the spikes of increased as well as decreased climatic factors that might be observed within short periods of time. And these have always been there, and they become a big problem. So if you have a drought event, what do you do? Of course, if you have drought-tolerant varieties that have been bred for that agroecological zone, then you'd be able to, they tend to have or grow longer roots that can go deeper into the soil and be able to capture moisture that has been stored within the soil. So we of course can enhance water-saving agriculture techniques within the soil also by breaking it using chisel plows before rains to allow early rains, rainwater to seep into the soil and go into the deeper areas of the soil. You see, a chisel plow can go as far as even 30 centimeters below. And so water is able to infiltrate inside and be able to be stored there. And it is not easily lost through capillary upward movement, which happens in the 12-15 centimeters of soil profile. So those are the techniques that we can have when it comes to tillage to enhance water saving, not only in the soil, but of course the others, which we have the water ponds, we may have dams that we later on can use them to supply water during times when we have dry spells that are caused by climate variability, and also that might have been caused by climate change, where climate change is where there is an increased incidence of certain events like drought. They may be more frequent, floods may be more frequent, storms might be more frequent, like over a long period of time. So you might be before probably used to have droughts maybe occurring once in 10 years, but now we are having droughts that are coming every 3 years. You have 1 year or 2 years that are having a drought event. So that tends to fall under climate change as opposed to climate variability, which tends to be much more short duration times. Of course, the issues of crop cycle management, issues of rotations, that will minimize populations of insect pests when they are enhanced due to high temperatures. Diseases also tend to come more if there are higher higher humidity in the atmosphere. And so when you have different crops which are not hosts for certain pathogens, then you tend to be able to help those crops adapt and you fight off the climate effects that may have caused those disease incidences. So we have harvesting and post-harvest technologies. This is towards minimizing losses. As I mentioned, issues about food loss is a big topic nowadays, especially in the culinary industry, restaurants, etc. There is a lot of food wastage amongst the wealthy people. But amongst the poor, they are losing a lot of their crops, up to 30 to 40% of most of the crops that we harvest end up rotting because we don't have good ways of storing this extra produce. So when we have high rains, we may end up having higher yields, but those higher yields, we may end up having no markets for them. And because we don't have good storage, we end up having losses. So the post-harvest handling of harvested crops is a big area where people can make a lot of money. In fact, when we are talking about enhancing or looking for ways of
Did we lose Professor Anthony?
I think we've lost Prof.
Maybe give him a few minutes.
Must be internet connectivity. Sometimes can
Yeah,
be
selling is with
challenge.
internet. We cannot control.
looking for jobs for the youth.
Is back.
Yeah, but you reshare.
Really?
Prof Anthony,
I'm sorry.
you
Yeah,
reshare. Yeah, you went off a bit. The internet. You lost, but you reshare just screen.
Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
Let's share again.
Are we back?
Yes, good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, our internet connectivity here is not the best. But let me move on. I think, that was a more or less a brief introduction, which talks about the dimensions, talks about the opportunities that are there. And we can discuss further on all this. I think even all of us have different ideas on what we can do as a way of either increasing productivity or adapting to those climate variations or mitigating the greenhouse effects. So I think I might have alluded to some of this. I think I have mentioned about issues of water. When you look at reduced wastewater floods, where I've highlighted, we talked about flooded soils. And the good and best example I normally use is for rice. Other crops that we grow under flooded conditions or submerged conditions are colocasia. Colocasia, we call it as nduma here in Kenya. We also have jute. Jute is a fiber crop, which has been used to make bags which are very good for, they are green, they are biodegradable. There are a lot of synthetics that are coming from Asia, which are not very good for our environment. But jute, we need to go into that in our deltas, in a flooded area. So what do we do with the wastewater? If when soils are submerged for just about 4 days, they become reduced. They don't have oxygen. Oxygen is reduced. That's why we say they are reduced soils. So there is always the chemical reaction with the reduction and oxidation, which we call it as a redox reaction. Any chemical reaction tends to have a redox kind of relationship, which is where one some of the molecules, they give out the electrons and others receive. So hydrogen that tends to have one extra electron tends to give that extra electron to an oxygen molecule, which has minus 2. So you end up having what we call as H2O. 2 hydrogens, they couple with oxygen and they end up becoming water, or H2O. So hydrogen is the reductant and oxygen is the oxidant. So anyway, that's a bit of the chemistry that sometimes we learn in our basic courses that we need to understand in order for us to understand issues about floods. So in reduced oxygen soils, you tend to have oxygen and anaerobic conditions prevail, which end up now bringing about the oxidation of carbon dioxide into methane. And that methane now is volatilized, especially at high temperatures, above 35 degrees centigrade. And you end up having a lot of methane production. So our aim is to avoid flooding for a long time. So if we can reduce wastewater floods, then we will be able to kind of mitigate against the greenhouse gases. Of course, nitrogen is another input which we normally apply as a nutrient, and it can cause eutrophication. I think all of us know about that. When it is leached into our soils, through our soils, and it ends up in lakes or in rivers, then there's a lot of rich water, and ultimately a lot of growth occurs. That growth of foliage matter ends up absorbing a lot of oxygen in the water, which ends up denying the life forms within the water, like fish and other organisms, and they end up dying. So that can be a big problem. So we want to enhance nitrogen. And of course, again, under reduced soils, you tend to find nitrous gas, okay? Which now ends up again being volatilized, and it ends up being in the atmosphere. So we must manage our floods. I think I mentioned the issues of lignified pastures. We must, which lead to a lot of enteric fermentation in ruminants, and ultimately they end up forming methane. So let us feed our livestock with better quality pastures, which are not very old, that tend to be easily digestible. And that way we can also mitigate against greenhouse gases. So we also, I think, mentioned about soil management and plant nutrition. Again, I think it's more or less a repetition. So those are some of the factors that are within that particular area. Then there's the issue of declining rainfall. Of course, droughts are there. There are issues of more intense rainfall. Like today here in Kenya, it has really rained. We couldn't harvest. We were planning to do a lot of things. I've been out in the field since morning, since yesterday, because of the heavy rains. And sometimes they become a problem. And if they end up flooding our soils, we end up having a big problem. I think I mentioned issues about high temperatures, enhancing mineralization and decomposition of organic matter, which also becomes a challenge because of carbon emission. and they reduce the westering carbon effect. In fact, I want to say here that I was approached by some people who wanted to use basalt. Basalt is one of our rocks here in the Rift Valley, and they were arguing that if you use basalt and you actually apply it in the soils, it sequesters carbon. So they were asking, are we able to work together? Go to the mines that mine your stones for building houses. We have a lot of mines here, quarries, and they powder it. They take the basalt stone, which is many in the Rift Valley, and that one now we can apply it in the soil. Of course, there are issues. It takes a long time. It can take up to 3-4 years, but with time we'll be able to help to sequester carbon through our soils, and of course reduce the acidity that is in the soil. The way we also use rock phosphate and lime. So that's something that some people from Stanford University, we were discussing with them, I think a few weeks ago, and they are interested in that. And I thought, well, if they have that technology, we can think about it. And maybe also, hopefully there'll be funding and we can go that way because we have the resources. Crop management, I mentioned that. Animal management, I think we mentioned about the enteric fermentation, and of course, trying to use good pastures, and then we move on to the common practices that are used in mitigation of global warming. I may want to ask if there are any questions at this point from that before we go into the next section. The next section actually is very common. We must have come across, if you are a student of agriculture, it's what we normally call as good agricultural practices. When I studied environmental science many years ago, and it was a key thing, I used to go to classes and I would say, oh, that I know. Oh, I know about that. There was really nothing new. It was using the basic sciences and applied sciences and just approaching them in a different view, that it has an environmental impact. So there'll be really nothing new to most of us. I have given a few materials there that can be read. And of course, at the end of our presentation, there's a lot of literature, but I believe that we all know about what we are going to discuss about the practices that are used to adapt to global warming or mitigate against global warming or enhancing the productivity. Is there any comment or question, or do I move on?
Thank you. Can I move on?
Okay, thank you. Now, these tables are, I don't know whether you can see them clearly, but we've tried to combine all these activities in the various clusters that Oliver mentioned. For instance, here we have water harvesting and management. And under this cluster, we have the climate smart agricultural type. We have the drainage management. I think I've mentioned about that. The description, what it is all about, what drainage does when it talks about productivity, drainage of excess water improves soil aeration, porosity, consequently results in improved crop performance and yield. How does it help in adaptation? It reduces risks in crop failure due to flooding and waterlogged conditions. So when you drain out all this water, it helps in aerating the soil, so you help your crops adapt. The issues of mitigation, of course, that's reduction of the greenhouse gases, as I mentioned, understanding your soil chemistry, and of course, issues of reducing the methane and nitrous gas production. So that's how these tables are laid out, and I'll just quickly be going through because we have a lot of information, and already I'm seeing that I have only 20 more minutes. So I wouldn't mind if you raise a question later on, if in case you don't understand one particular aspect. I'll try to the best of my ability to answer it. So irrigation, of course, irrigation, you know, it really combats drought. So it's the artificial application of water, and it enhances water availability, available water, you may know in water, in your soil studies. And therefore the crop can be able to take up nutrients, which are usually taken up in dissolved form through diffusion, osmosis, and ultimately it helps in crop productivity. Of course, when you irrigate, you help the crop to adapt, and you increase the ground cover and biomass, which ensures carbon sinks. The more above ground biomass you have, the more of the carbon that has been assimilated in the crop that you're growing or that is growing that area. Issues of minimum tillage, I think I mentioned that. Mulching, of course, it helps to reduce evaporation of the little soil that might be within the soil profile, and thus making it available for crops. And when it's available, you enhance the growth and the yield, thus increasing productivity. It also reduces the risks of crop failure due to flooding, due to mostly evaporation, drought spells. And so the crop is able to adapt to the drought. And of course, you increase the ground cover. Rainwater harvesting, we mentioned, it enables dry season production that compensates for reduced rainfall, and of course, making off-season production possible. And again, you increase the ground cover. So you might find that the mitigation might be more or less the same, because so long as you're enhancing growth, you're enhancing carbon sinks. So it's not just reforestation, but of course, it's any crop that continues growing on the earth. It helps in absorbing the carbon dioxide and therefore reducing it from increasing. I think we talked about issues of soil fertility management and reducing denitrification, which leads to production of nitrous, which is a powerful greenhouse gas, almost 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So what we need to understand is that even though carbon dioxide may not be a big problem, in that it doesn't absorb so much of the heat that is reflected from the Earth's surface, but the problem is that it is the highest GHG greenhouse gas, because it is a lot of it is produced. But there are these other smaller gases, like we are mentioning the nitrous oxide, we're mentioning about the methane gas, we are mentioning about the fluorochlorocarbons, we are mentioning about the chlorofluorocarbons. You know, the chlorofluorocarbons, they can absorb even 10,000 times of heat more than carbon dioxide. So the more we use the aerosols, the ones we spray, even freon gas that is used in the refrigerator, we've been taught that it's also one of the chlorofluorocarbons. So we have to use different refrigeration systems that will help us to mitigate against those gases. And we can see here a pictorial diagram that shows about the sources of nitrous oxide. You can see issues of just nitrogen fertilizers, as I mentioned, combustion of power plants, about 7%. We have industrial production, of course, about 6%. Issues of manure, as I was saying, we should try and look at ways of composting our manure, vermicomposting. Any way of composting can help minimize the nitrous gas production, transportation, kind of cars, and others. You can be able to do that. And one other thing I wanted to mention here is about these bacteria. You know, there's a nitrification bacteria, like you find here ammonium, nitrogen undergoes ionization and therefore ultimately ammonification, and it produces ammonium gas. And this is through Nitrosomonas bacteria. We also have other bacteria like Nitrobacter, which of course now brings a lot of nitrates. These processes can be mitigated by nitrification inhibiting chemicals that are nowadays available in the market, like NSAV. I think I'll be showing you later on when we have the chance. When you apply them in the soil, they minimize the bacteria activity, and therefore we can be able to mitigate agricultural organic soils. I mean, agricultural organic nitrogen that might be within the soil, and reduce the 78% to maybe just about 65% if we can minimize bacteria activity within the soils. I think this is, you'll be getting these notes. I mentioned about issues of the redox potential. Those are when you have aerated soils with a redox potential.
I think we have lost Prof. Kibe. Let's go for Prof. Oliver.
Yes. Yes, I think we've lost him.
About 2
Again, I think it's the issue of connectivity.
Yeah, I am back.
I
think I'm back. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm a small-scale farmer, so I may not have resources, as had been mentioned earlier. But we live up here in the village. We live in the village where we don't have very good connectivity. They will move on. Okay, so those are some of the NSAV, as I mentioned. We apply nitrification inhibitors and the DCD, dicyanodiamide. Of course, you can use urea, but urea, the Chinese have come up with mud balls where you cover the urea with the mud balls. And even I've seen some are coming in from Germany, where you have the slow release fertilizer. So what you call as a urea super granules. It's just a coating on the urea, which will help to slowly release the ammonium, because when the ammonium is released, it can easily be converted into nitrates, and those nitrates ultimately in reduced soils, they end up becoming nitrous gas. So those are ways that you can use for mitigation. I think I've covered that. Crop diversification. This is the area of where farmers grow different types of crops so as to minimize the effects of climate variability or climate change that may be due to high temperatures leading to drought, or there may be even low temperatures leading to freezing. And even sometimes we have hail. So the varieties that we grow, like we talk about leaf estivation. If you have leaves, I hope you can see me in my screen. If you have leaves that are wide like this, and there is hail, then there's a tendency of there being more damage. But if you have leaves that are tending to be narrow, this section here, then you might have less damage when it comes to heavy downpour or you have hail. So we want to breed varieties that are able to be able to avoid those effects of climate variability. Post-harvest handling, I think I mentioned about food loss, wastage. You can reduce risks associated with increased food insecurity and food loss. Biodegradation of food waste also emits methane gas. I think I mentioned that. Issues of post-harvest handling, enhancing the storage can help in increasing the productivity of available food, helps in adapting to food. I mean, if you don't have enough, but you've stored enough, you will not go hungry, so you adapt to that climatic effect. And of course, when the biodegradation occurs, you can reduce carbon emissions and methane emissions. Okay. We also have issues of food distribution and marketing, food consumption and food waste disposal. All these are areas in science that you can actually pursue as a way of making business or income and being able to also mitigate against the greenhouse gases. Of course, we mentioned about livestock. Aquaculture, this is where you integrate, water management with crop production. I've been seeing a lot of mangrove cultivation in Asia, and even now in the coastal countries that have a coast, like in Kenya. There are many women that are now starting to grow mangroves, which enhance aeration and oxidation of our soils, and of course in sinking carbon dioxide, and thus mitigating against the greenhouse gases. And of course, the mangroves, I think, are very useful in various ways within some of our cultures, as they help also in increasing income in our foods, in our household. Diet management, I mentioned, especially when it comes to livestock. I think I've mentioned about rice cultures, genetic improvement, improved livestock and fish breeds, resulting in increased productivity. Animals that are able to assimilate faster lignified material, that would be very, very helpful because it will help to reduce methane production. So breeders are called upon to do that. It can be, it's mostly, I think, amongst ruminants. And of course, I mentioned about pasture. It's good to feed pastures that are relatively not too young, but not old, because of the challenges in digestion. When you have very low dry matter digestibility, then you end up having, those feeds remaining in the stomach for a long time, thus producing the greenhouse gases such as methane. Manure management, I think I mentioned that as well. We need to do a lot of composting and having manures that don't have a lot of lignin and hemicellulose and cellulose. Okay. Issues about agroforestry. I'm seeing I only have 5 minutes. Should we go to a time of question and answer? Agroforestry is there. I think we mentioned it. We have ridge planting, anything that helps in water management. Yeah.
I think you can give time for Q&A, and then we proceed from there tomorrow, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But you'll be getting all these notes, therefore you'll be able to go through them for further reading as well. Okay, I think I would want to stop there and welcome any questions that you may have or any comments.
You can raise your hands.
Yeah. Am I able to see any hands being raised here? I am not very sure.
Participants, please raise your hands. Ato Francisca, you can unmute and ask your question. Ato Francisca. Francisca. There is one raised hand from Ato, but this one is not unmuting. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, please. Thank you for your elaborate presentation. My concern is the composting of manure. You mentioned that if you yes, as you compost manure, there is high chances of releasing too much air into the atmosphere. That is the greenhouse gases. I am requesting to know that whether it is possible to have a mechanism of neutralizing this gas before it is taken to the atmosphere. Briefly, that's my point.
Okay, you are cutting off here and there. I am not able to capture, but what I just heard was when you're composting, you're likely to release a lot of gases that might also contribute to greenhouse. Yeah, of course, there will be gases that will come. Carbon dioxide definitely will be there. But you see, as I mentioned, the more dangerous gas is the methane, because it holds 298 times more heat than carbon dioxide. So for every molecule of methane, it will be able to hold 300 times more heat. So it's like trying to accept two types of evils. So which is the greater evil? Do we just allow the normal biodegradation? I think there's some background noise. Somebody's trying to talk. That's how I would answer your question. So composting has been considered as one way of minimizing our organic wastes because there's a lot of wastes that we are producing in our homes, a lot of wastes that especially are being dumped in our cities. If you go in every city, you will be shocked at the amount of waste that is just naturally biodegrading. And those are very, very big sources of methane gas and other gases. So if we compost them, we will be able to minimize those gases. Okay. I'm seeing here a question in the Q&A. Which one is easiest to practice? Climate smart agriculture for mitigation and adaptation. This is Fenta Asefa. I think she's, I don't know whether, I think it's a she, I'm sorry, but I'm not familiar with those names, but it's like, which one is easier, mitigation or adaptation? As we know, climate variability is the major issue affecting crop production. And from genetics point of view, in variable climate, there will be mutation, which will lead to the deletion of necessary genes. So please justify. Okay, mutation definitely happens, but we live with a risk. I might say that we live with a risk of mutations, and those have been natural in our ecosystems in the world. So that's part of life. When we induce mutations, maybe that is what Fenta is worried about, then there's a possibility of having something that may not work. And that's very true, I do agree. But then what do we do? I mean, if we, for instance, there are some Americans who came and they were talking about having a maize that is drought tolerant. And they had genetically modified it. And this maize crop, you could actually grow it in some of the very, places that are easily affected by drought, occasional drought. So the option is, do we still continue with our normal land races and still have hungry people, still have famine, and people die, you still have stunted growth, people who do not reach their maximum productive potential. And these are in millions and millions. In fact, when you see the effects of, I was trying to read one of the United Nations document, they talk over 738 million people have been affected by climate variability and change in various ways. So I think it's a question that we all have to live with. Should I start promoting a genetically modified organism which can help in increasing, food for the hungry in climate sensitive areas? Or do we continue holding on to our worries and concerns? I think that's what I would say. When you talk which is much more easy, mitigation or adaptation? Is there somebody who can help me answer the question? I don't think there's anything easy in the world. Everything we have to tackle it. Yes, Oliver.
You see, if we only wait to adapt and we don't tackle the reason why we're adapting, then it becomes very difficult. So as we try to adapt to the changing situation, we should also try as much as possible to reduce the causes of the risk to which we are trying to adapt. So tackling the two is very, very crucial. Otherwise, it can be a very endless journey.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I think in addition to what Oliver says, Fenta, I hope you are still here because I noticed that you had mentioned you might be leaving. Yes, the questions, the presentations will be given to you. Definitely, I think we have been assured of that. And
There is
there's a lot
also
of further reading. Yeah.
there is a raised hand from Grace.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm just.
thank you.
Okay, Grace.
Can I go ahead? Can I go ahead?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Yes.
you so much for the thank you so much for the highlights you've raised.
Yeah.
I am a specialist in beekeeping. When you
Okay.
mentioned about chemicals, I got worried because bees are an important agent in pollination for increased
Yeah.
crops. So
Yeah.
when you go the chemical way, I get a little bit scared, but I think maybe there can be a balance that can be struck. The other issue is the mulching. The mulching
Yeah.
has been known to be a cause of a lot of pests. I don't know how you can also help us handle that issue. Then the last issue is the GMO. When we when we go in for GMOs, I am also a little bit worried how they can fit in correctly in the food chain. I have in mind this. Let me use an example that that just came recently. The genetically modified mosquitoes, which of course cannot cause malaria. How do they actually fit in the food chain? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I'll try to answer. Of course, bees are very useful to us, and we need them for pollination and other activities. A lot of communities depend on honey, and of course, honey is good for us. It gives us energy. I am not very sure. I mentioned when I talked about chemicals. Did I don't remember saying whether we are supposed to increase our use of chemicals. I don't remember saying so. In fact, the whole idea is to minimize. When we talked about integrated pest management, integrated nutrient management, integrated weed management, it's a way of using organics and synthetics. It's a way of using cultural methods together with the organics and together with some of the synthetics. I do work with some people who grow herbs for export, and it's a big concern when you export certain herbs that have a certain, they emphasize on minimum residue within those crops that are supposed to be consumed. And if you go above the MRLs or the minimum residue levels of certain chemicals, then they are rejected. And so we are advocating for an integrated approach where you kind of even intercropping. You can intercrop certain varieties like beans. We had one study where we had Alternaria as a big problem, is a fungus, which causes necrosis or the browning of the leaves, and so photosynthesis is affected. So if you use fungicides, they're expensive and a small-scale farmer can't afford. So we brought in some varieties that had resistance to those Alternaria. And when you integrated them at a ratio of 50-50, you were able at least to mitigate against the fungal attack. And now when you add a little more of the chemical at lower rates, then there's a tendency of you using less pesticides. So that's what we are talking about here, using less chemicals, especially the synthetic ones. I hope I've clarified that. Mulching is a cause of pests. Of course, we have like the stalk borer, but that's why we are talking about composting. instead of just leaving a mulch, especially that may have those pests within them, can you see how you can compost? When we compost, we enhance the temperatures within that mass. And it can even reach temperatures of about 80 degrees centigrade. And this can cause, death of some of these pests that within that mass. And so you minimize the transferring the pests to other crops that might be grown in rotation. You mentioned about GMOs in malaria. I may not be very competent in that area, but I think the whole issue would be, like now there's a mosquito flying around me and I'm trying to kill it. Now, should I use GMOs that can be able to cause death of those malaria-carrying parasites, malaria-carrying mosquitoes? If there is a way to sterilize them, I think that is one of the ways where you allow the mating of the Anopheles mosquito with mosquitoes that are not able to, they are sterile. So whatever progeny they produce, they are not able to multiply. I think it's another question of the pros and cons. If the country is spending so much money on drugs, we are importing so much into Kenya especially, and I believe in the region, even in West Africa, in Southern Africa. And some of these drugs are also fake, that you take them and they do not cure you. The misery that is in our homes, the effects on productivity, children fail to go to school. And at the end of the day, they remain poor. They remain in a vicious circle because they got sick when they were young and they still carry those plasmodium within their body system that once in a while erupts and they end up just going down. I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves. Should we adopt and minimize the mosquito population in order, to be able to just fight against malaria? Some countries are still using some chemicals that have been banned by the World Health Organization. They still spray in their ponds, especially in rice growing areas where there's this big pandemic. But they are going into the soils, they are going into the groundwater. Ultimately, you pump it up and you drink that water. And it's the cause of some of the cancers we are now seeing coming up in our countries. I think we just have to live with it and make the tough decisions. I think that's what I can say about this, but others may add in case there's something more or examples that you can give towards Grace's question. A quick question: are there practices favored by farmers? Of course they are. It depends on their resources. Which case in mind can I think of? I've talked about the push and pull technology where you want to control the stalk borer in maize. So what you do is you bring in napier, you grow it around your the areas around your maize, and the stalk borer can come and lay eggs within the furrows of the napier, and then that napier you will harvest it before it matures and feed it as a fodder to the livestock, and therefore you are able to control the stalk borers. You can also use desmodium also as an intercrop, as a pull. It's a push and pull technology, so it pulls. The napier pulls and the desmodium pushes because it emits certain gases that when the moth comes to lay the egg, it smells some of these chemicals that are being emitted by the desmodium, and it is not able to lay eggs in the maize that is being intercropped with desmodium. So you'll find this happening in like in Western Kenya. It's preferred because you end up having the fodder and you still be able to have your food crop from the maize. Secondly, adoption of CSA appear to be needed. Achieving the three principles, is this not a limitation to its application? Thirdly, at what point do we discuss soil and leaf testing as CSA practices? This is from Samuel Enoch. I'm trying to understand your question. Secondly, adoption of CSA appear to be needing achieving the three practices. That's true. We want to achieve all the three. So you're arguing, is this not limiting to its application? Definitely. I had that problem in understanding that we need to increase productivity. We must adapt to that change in climate, and we must also control the greenhouse gases. Yes, you're right, Enoch. Some of us say it must accomplish all the three, but for me, I think if it accomplishes two, it's good enough for me. Like for instance, this slide of mine here, you can see it talks about sustainable bioenergy, SBE, sustainable bioenergy. This is improved cooking gas. You see, how does it increase productivity? It's nil here. Okay. But does it help to reduce environmental risk associated with deforestation and therefore adaptation? You may say yes. And thirdly, does it help in reducing greenhouse emissions? Yes, so you see, it because you don't burn and form carbon dioxide. So it helps in meeting the two, but when you talk about increasing food productivity, you may have to stretch your mind. So I do agree that there can be some limitation. Second, adoption of CSA, okay, is it not limiting? Okay, thirdly, at what point do we discuss soil and leaf testing as CSA practice? Well, why do we test the soil? We test to see the inherent soil fertility, isn't it? When we do leaf testing, we also try to look at the uptake of nutrients. So if it is limited, then we understand that that soil doesn't have enough of that particular nutrient, and therefore we look for ways of how to make it available. So the question is, how do we make it available? For instance, I'm trying to quickly think of an example we were having with nematodes. You see, nematodes are small soil microorganisms that affect root tubers, they affect onions, and many crops in our soils. Like now for potato, a lot of soils in our country have been rendered ineffective because of the root knot nematodes and other types of nematodes. And so we were saying, if the crop cannot be able to absorb the nutrients because all these nematodes have caused injury, and that injury becomes a source of infection of fungal and bacterial diseases, and they end up blocking the xylem vessels that are supposed to take up water. So what do we do? Can we feed this crop from the top? Instead of feeding if it's nitrogen and phosphorus and all these other micronutrients, can we feed it from the foliage? And people are saying, yes, in fact, that's the future. Apply foliar nutrients. In fact, a big business opportunity, anybody that will be working with foliar nutrient application will do well. Because you then mitigate against the effects of the nematodes, the effects of thrips, the effects of fungus, the effects of bacteria that might have been caused by flooding or high soil moisture soils, which have been brought about by high rainfall. So I think Oliver mentioned that the other modules, we can improve on this module with time also to discuss such areas, which are very, very interesting. Currently, approximately 700 million people live in extreme poverty, with 800 million suffering from chronic hunger, 2 billion facing micronutrient deficiency. Yes, addressing these staggering numbers is crucial for ensuring basic human needs are met. Amidst discussion on sustainable production, the pressing question remains, how can we effectively provide food for this extremely poor and hungry population? I think that is Walcott. Walcott, I think you mentioned up to there. I think it ends there. How can we? I think what we all talking about is partially what we can do. And a quick answer, which I will not belabor in this, is what we talked about, post-harvest handling. If we can minimize our losses, if you talk about the losses of food being wasted by our farmers in their field after harvest, if we can reduce it from 40 or 30% to about just 20%, that can greatly enhance availability of food. Because when we get bumper harvest due to good rain, we end up losing it in poor storage and wastage. So can we quickly look at markets that we can be able to exchange foods from the high produce areas quickly going down, and they should be made available, of course, and affordable. Can they be processed into forms that they cannot easily be biodegraded? Like dehydration. I had a visit in one of the Western universities, and they were talking about dehydration. If you minimize any food produce after harvest to less than 13% moisture content, there are no bugs that will attack it, nothing. Whether it is the weevils, whether it is the greater grain borers, when it comes to diseases, they'll not have enough moisture for them to penetrate. So it's all about dehydration. And that's a post-harvest technology measure. So I think those are the questions in the Q&A. And I think there's so much quietness. Should we continue or should we stop there? Yes, Oliver.
Yes, thanks very much, Professor Kibe. I think this has been quite interesting, and there are so many questions coming up. We've tried as much as possible to answer them on the Q&A. I've been trying to provide answers there. But of course, it's also part of the interesting discussion I'm talking about. So I think this can go on and on and on. Someone suggested somewhere that, can we have a WhatsApp group for this? And I'm just throwing this back to David and the team, so that some of this can also be followed up in the group through some sort of co-learning, process, so that we can also save the energy for tomorrow. That was my input, Prof. Kibe.
Yeah, I'm okay with that suggestion. And you'll find that we'll keep repeating these things because, as I mentioned, they are not new to us. Different disciplines have addressed them in different ways. It's just that now we are looking at them from the perspective of the environment. The bigger picture of environment has become a big concern. So every one of us, I believe, has an input that you can bring in the discussion. That's very welcome. And we debate about it, we brainstorm about it. And I always say that there's nothing wrong, everything is right. And we will be able to pick on what we can do together. And we move on as our countries, as our nations, as Africa as a whole. Thank you very much for being, for your participation, for your contributions. Let's meet tomorrow, God willing. Thank you, Oliver.
Asante sana, Prof. Kibe. I think we need now to get it back to Ruforum team. I can see people are warming up to the suggestion of the WhatsApp group. So, but I think it's them who will definitely know how best to handle this. So, I think David, can you have it back, kindly?
Yes, Prof. Thanks a lot. I overheard the issue about the WhatsApp group. So I think that's a welcome suggestion for forum. We can actually create it. So tomorrow when we are doing the registration, we shall include a slot for numbers. So each of you can include your WhatsApp number so that we can compile and add to the group.
Someone is also asking for the registration link. Maybe you just share it again afresh.
Yes, it's there. I've been resharing it. Let me try to pick it again. Yes, it's on chat. Let's everyone take like 1 minute to just complete the registration for today.
Are we also expected to register?
Yes.
I don't think you're expected to register. We expect you to be there every day.
David, actually, the webinar captures it automatically. There is no need for a separate registration link for all participants.
Okay. So maybe some outlook for tomorrow. You want to say something?
Maybe Florence and Prof. Majaliwa can also say something.
Yeah. Are they in the?
Yes, we are here.
The meeting? Okay,
And,
okay.
Thank you very much, Oliver and Anthony, for the discussion. I think David Martin, Professor Majaliwa did want to have a discussion with both Oliver and Anthony for tomorrow, but we shall start at the same time tomorrow. And yeah, but we need to have, maybe there's David Martin, what is the best way to handle this?
We can remain behind.
Yeah.
We can remain behind on the call as participants leave.
Yes.
But I can send you a separate link.
Yeah, I
Since
think
this
we
one
send
is
a
already-
separate link.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Okay.
then, yeah.
Okay, let me send.
Okay, I think we can end here for today. David, maybe you can.